welcome everybody. We've got a very special event today where we have got Vectorworks maestro Jonathan Reeves here, who is based in the UK. Jonathan is an architect of many years' experience who runs his own practice, is focused on a lot of residential projects, and he's probably one of the most, if not the most knowledgeable Vectorworks user trainer on the planet. He's got the most successful Vectorworks YouTube channel, which Nicole, could you put Jonathan's YouTube channel into the chat box? If you're not already subscribing to that, please go and have a look at that. There is an epic amount of brilliant content on it, which will give you very concise, well thought out, illustrated, informational videos on how to use Vectorworks. And I think it's always interesting, when I talk to some of you guys who have been Vectorworks users in the past, so many people are kind of just don't realize the power of that piece of software. I'm a Vectorworks user myself. I don't draft that much these days, but when I did draft, Vectorworks was always my preferred piece of software. And we underestimate what it can actually do and how quickly its BIM capabilities have done, how good it is up on the front end and being able to produce incredible renders and quality drawings. And just in terms of being able to produce really efficient, time-saving workflows. And this is where the expertise of someone like Jonathan can really maximize, production efficiency. A piece of software like Vectorworks has got endless amounts of things that are very, very quick, easy, and can minimize the amount of repetitious work that we're doing. Okay, well, Jonathan today is going to give us a bit of an overview on the capabilities of Vectorworks in 2024. He's going to show us how it integrates with things like Enscape and Twinmotion. And then we'll have, we'll be able to have a chance to kind of ask questions as we go along relating to anything that you've seen. I know, Tyser, we were talking earlier about, what your guys are trying to do in terms of BIM capabilities, and do recommend it's well worth having a chat with Jonathan probably after
We'll make
this.
a bit of time for some questions, absolutely, all being well. Great, Ryan. Thank you so much for the introduction. Shall I fire away and share my screen? And I'll try and take a few little pauses for breath as we go through. But of course, called my talk Unleashing Your Creativity and Powering Up Your Productivity, Exploring 3D Workflows with Vectorworks 2024, Twinmotion and Enscape. And obviously within the time scale available, I would like to try and cover some of the 3D capabilities of Vectorworks, obviously not all of them, just touch on a light touch on a few projects and things. I'd also like to talk a little bit about some of the exciting features of Twinmotion, and finally unveil the power of Enscape, which is now on the Mac for the first time fairly recently, and it's been developing at quite a good rate. So this means we've got some amazing sort of 3D modeling capabilities and good rendering in Vectorworks. Then we've got amazing real-time rendering with Twinmotion, and then Enscape on top, all on the Mac or Windows. So really, really great capabilities, and they introduce a lot of different options that you can do. Look, I quite like trying to throw myself into live demos. Always a risky thing, as we were talking about, Ryan, but I'm going to go for it and do some live demos for you and some Q&A as well. So just before we, go for it.
Is it worth mentioning as well that this whole presentation is being done not on PowerPoint, not on Keynote, but on Vectorworks itself? I think that's
Absolutely. So, rather than doing a keynote, which I love, keynote's great, you can do lots of flashy effects and things. I thought, as the bulk of my projects are in Vectorworks, you're going to see how amazing Vectorworks is as a presentation tool. And I'm going to demonstrate it by showing you my presentation all in Vectorworks, 100%. So all my slides, everything I've got in Vectorworks here. Okay, so a little bit of background about myself. Ryan did a great introduction, so I don't need to say much more than that. Where am I based? Well, here's the map of England or Britain. I'm bang in the middle, so good location to get anywhere within 2 or 3 hours, which is quite nice. Pretty much up to Scotland or down to London. So I've been a practicing architect in the UK for over 20 years, let's call it that. And obviously I've been using Vetwitz my entire career, actually, since university back in the day, and I won't quite name the date, but a while ago. I've also been a top reseller for Vectorworks, so I've gained a lot of expertise and experience, and I've worked with some amazing clients all over the UK and Ireland. But recently, I've kind of started my YouTube channel a few years ago, and I've been putting a more effort into that recently. I love making the videos, and great that some of you have seen those already. Something I'm really passionate about, and it's kind of taken me a bit more, like Rion has, a bit more global, I would say. It's really nice. I've got lots of clients all over America, Canada, Australia, Germany, all over the world really these days. So good fun, definitely. So here we go. This is what I'm going to really try and talk about. I thought I'd kind of put some sort of, wordiness in here before I get going with the live demoing. So, in my view, in the realm of architectural design, the integration of advanced 3D workflows is a transformative force in that it pushes your creativity, collaboration, and your visualization. So for me, those things are really important at the front end as well as the sort of back end. This talk's probably going to focus a bit more on the front end and the creativity side, not the documentation and the hardcore stuff. I sent to Rion, perhaps I'll do one of those talks in the future. So we're going to explore how architects can harness the combined power of Vectorworks, Twinmotion and Enscape to enhance your design process really, to bring your visions to life. So for me, Vectorworks has always served as the foundation of my architectural creativity. It's offered amazing 3D modeling capabilities, even right from the beginning, right from back in that first time back in university, I was modeling up my thesis project in 3D. So I've always worked in 3D. I rarely work in 2D these days at all. I find it a bit strange almost, architects just drafting in 2D. That's just the way I am these days with Vectorworks. So for me, you can basic design with a lot of precision and efficiency, and you can leverage things like project sharing or referencing to also share your information in real time with a wider team. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about these today, but Vetwitz has those capabilities, and they're basically really quite robust these days. The project sharing in the new Vectorworks is extremely robust. Now, I've always been into 3D and rendering, and I remember back in the day, in fact, I could probably show you one of my renders that took 72 hours. I've got it in the background. Maybe I will just flick onto it briefly. Right, see if I've got it here. Yeah, here we go. There we go. 72 DPI, 640 by 480, 72 hours of rendering on a Mac, making fan noises while I was trying to sleep in my student bedroom. But I was over the moon with that image, and I blew it up to A1, and it looked unbelievable on the wall, I thought at the time. But that's how long things took back in the day. So we've moved a long way. And basically, Twinmotion
that's pretty extraordinary image, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good little
from
story.
95, yeah.
Where I started, and it sort of makes me realize how easy and lucky we are now with the technology, both the hardware, Mac with their M3 Max processors and all these amazing new kind of processors out there that we have. And I feel like it's just taken a massive leap forward in the last couple of years. So for me, I'm really passionate about real-time rendering and visualization workflows. So, the icing on the cake is that real time and VR and all that kind of rendering stuff. That's the icing on the cake stuff. But it does mean that you've got to make a very good cake underneath it to get that 3D material. So, for me, the idea of doing a set of drawings in one program and then a 3D model in another program and then rendering in another software doesn't really make a joined up sense at all. I'd rather model and do everything in one software. And if I need that extra oomph for the ray tracing, high quality materials and lighting, I can just plug in Vectorworks to Twinmotion and Enscape. So hopefully that's what I'm going to try and demo to you guys, see what you think. Okay, so let's get started on the actual presentation. As I say, I am doing all of this in Vectorworks. So, little slideshow effect for you. I'll tell you how I did that later if you're interested. So the first thing is, you'll notice that I've got my new interface here. So I thought I'd actually start off with just talking about Vetwitz 2024 because we've got this brand new interface that just came out. So the couple of things I just want to talk about there briefly. So we've got this new home screen that arrived last year, and now this year we've got the new interface. Just briefly, talk about the home screen. To access my home screen, all I need to do is go up and click on this little home button up in the corner. and you'll see it will kind of pop up with a brand new window where it greets you with all of the files that you've been working on recently, which is really, really cool actually. So you can see what I've been up to pretty much all day today, preparing to present to you guys. You can see all the projects I've got here. I really like the way you can view them in list view, see the file size, when you last worked on them. I mean, a killer feature here would be how long you'd worked on them. They should add that for sure, so you can do your fee quotes. That would be really awesome. Definitely on the wish list. You can also see that you've got a few kind of what's new and sort of sample files. So this is just Vectorworks being friendly and communicating to you, which is nice. Over here, we've got the Learning tab, which is access to the university. The cloud services, which are really good. This is where you've got your iPad and iPhone app, Vectorworks Nomad, which many people don't use as much as they should or could. And this is a really good way to access your files on the move and to show people different projects, both in 2D and 3D. So that may be something you're not aware of that you could explore a bit more. A couple of other things like the message center, and then of course the customer portal and tech support. The good thing is, guys, it's all in one place. Previously to this, it was sort of darted here and there around to get help or libraries or whatever you needed. So I think it's a really nice improvement. Now, that was actually kind of last year's big improvement. This year's big improvement is the new interface. So if you're not on 2024, you'll kind of notice that basically the icons look a bit different. And we've got this new view bar at the top here. Okay, so just a couple of tips on this. You want to go up to this little cog and you'll notice there's 3 different modes. So you've got a regular mode, which is quite nice. On Windows, this works quite well, particularly. And basically, if you click on the button here for settings, you can introduce some additional options to your workspace. So I actually turn these off because I don't really feel the need to have my text here because I've already got it up in the menu. So, you know, that's fine. I can actually disable that one. You notice the snapping is also here as well. But if you turn the snapping off, it just reverts to where it was last year down at the bottom. So I'm pretty happy with that. So having done that, I can now spread my workspace across by using a compact mode. And you see it all kind of spreads out really nicely along the top here. Okay. One really cool thing though, is when you are presenting, note this, you can go into auto hide mode. So what that means is it automatically hides itself away for presentation and it only pops up as and when I need it. So when I go up to the top, it pops up. You'll also note that I've got my sidebars here, and if I want to, I can basically go up to my window, palettes, palette options, and there's a great little keyboard shortcut here that I've programmed into my workspace, which basically hides my docked palettes. So this, guys, clears everything away. So when I'm presenting to my clients, which I do a lot via Zoom, you know, rather than live meetings and lots of travel, especially in the pandemic, I can slide out my screens here and basically it only slides out the tools when I need them. To be honest, if you know enough keyboard shortcuts, which is something that I'm quite passionate about teaching, you can almost use Vectorworks in this full screen mode. But for those of you who want to just present in this mode, I think you'll agree, it looks really, really nice. And, you know, that means that now when I'm sort of moving around between different views, I've just got this sort of full screen capability. What do you think? It's cool, eh? I think that's nice. The new interface improvements are really, really nice. And I do beta test Vectorworks. I'm on the beta forums and the beta lists, and I see all the hard work that goes behind all of this. And I can tell you it's pretty phenomenal, the amount of refinement and work that went into this. So with a keyboard shortcut, I can just do Command-Alt-Z on my workspace and bring those back at any time. Good, okay, so that was those new features on the home screen and the interface, but I think what that shows you is Vectorworks has this very people-centered approach as a business. They're a bit like Apple, I would say, in my view. They want to make the customer experience as good as possible, and that's something that I've always enjoyed as a user and a sort of customer of Vectorworks, I guess. Okay, so let's jump into something a bit more exciting. The next thing I want to talk about is the enhanced 3D modeling and rendering capabilities just in Vectorworks itself, okay, before we talk about Twinmotion and Enscape for later on. So what I'm going to do here, guys, is basically, you see this little bit of text here. This is called a hyperlink. And this is a very cool little gadget that you can find from your dims and notes tools down here. Okay, this little hyperlink object here. And what the hyperlink does is very sensible. It basically just does whatever I ask it to do, opens a web page, opens a document, gives me a QR code which I can scan and link to something. In this case, all I've got it to do is open a document. So when I hold the command key down and click, that's going to open my next file, which is a bit flash, but it's nice and convenient for me. So if you're not already using hyperlinks, it's something that I would definitely recommend embedding into your drawings. You can imagine lots of uses for this, things like engineers' specifications or a website for, a specification for the bathroom, that kind of thing. Anybody using those hyperlinks at all?
Probably hyperlinks. Is there a way to
Yeah.
publish them and have them carried through in your PDFs?
Yes, they will publish as a PDF, but only if it's a web link. Obviously, it can't link to a file that it doesn't have. So web links are the one thing that do work on a PDF. They work pretty well. Okay, great. Okay, so what I've got here is a very simple little demo project that I created just as part of one of my YouTube tutorials, really, just to explore something in Vectorworks, and I called it the Vectorworks Cafe. So at the moment you can see, if I go inside the cafe, we're in white card mode, okay? So the nice thing about this, let me just hide that interface there, is I can basically visualize my sort of massing and the idea of the space without getting drawn into materiality, which I think is quite nice. Now, if you do want to replicate this, let me just go up here and put my view bar back on full mode, compact mode. All I need to do is pop into shaded options, and you'll see that all I've done in here is basically turn everything off. So I've turned off the textures, the colors, shadows, pretty much everything. And that's where you get this nice white card mode. The only thing that I've got going on in there is this ambient occlusion. And you can see what a difference that makes in terms of bringing out the sort of soft shadows. So ambient occlusion, a really great little tip. I love ambient occlusion, and you can play with the strength there. So you can kind of play around with the brightness as well. So that's my first little tip. The white card mode in Vetwitz is very easy to achieve, actually. So secondly, I'm going to go to something a bit more conceptual. I've called it cartoon mode. It's very sketchy, it's very loose. If I showed you this as a client, you wouldn't get too bogged down in, oh, is that the finished thing? It's kind of clearly supposed to be conceptual. So the way that I've achieved this is going to my shaded options. You can see I've now turned on textures and colors, a little bit of anti-aliasing, but not shadows just yet, so it's flat. But I have turned on these edges. Okay, and that's where these edges come in, and I've made them pretty thick. Okay, now you can have them at sort of normal level is 1, and that's how it normally looks, quite low. But if you make it a bit thicker, it definitely looks quite conceptual and cartoony. So that's a pretty cool little setting. If I go into my next save view, this is basically shaded only. And I think you'll agree it's starting to look a bit more realistic, isn't it? We've turned off the edges. It looks a little bit more realistic, but the rendering isn't quite there yet, okay? But shaded rendering is super nice, and the advantage with it is, you can just kind of move around, navigate around in real time in your Vetwitz window, full screen, very good. Let's go down to the next option, view 4. So here we go. We're stepping it up a bit now. We're introducing some lighting and some reflections into Vectorworks. So these are fairly recent developments in the shaded rendering that Vectorworks have. They weren't there a few years ago, so you didn't have these. So we go into shaded options, and the big difference here is these 3. Now these came in with Vectorworks 2023. So if you're on an older version, you won't have these yet, but look at the difference. The biggest one is the object reflections and the environmental reflections. Makes a massive difference, actually. You can see that shine of the floor and the environmental lighting bouncing around. And then environmental lighting introduces a bit more depth, I would say, into the image. What do you think, guys? It's pretty cool, eh? For shaded rendering for a CAD software.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's good. And you can still navigate around in real time. It wouldn't necessarily work in this rendered mode, but if I want to give you as the clients a bit of an experience, I think you'll agree this will communicate and do the job without me having to go to Twinmotion or Enscape, really. This is me just designing and giving you the best experience I can. Okay, so my next view is shaded option with lighting. Okay, so the big difference here is I've actually turned on another layer. Okay, let's bring back my palettes a bit more permanently for a second. Okay, so if I go to layers, you'll notice that I've just got a layer for lighting there. So without the lighting, it definitely looks a bit darker. Turn the lighting on, really boosts it up. Now, I'm not seeing the lights at the moment, but if I do want to see them, all I need to do is go up to my view bar. And what's really nice about the view bar is I can click here, and if I forget what the icons do, I can actually kind of read in here and click and access the drop down from here now, which is really, really cool. So the reason the lighting isn't showing is because I'm in always in wireframe, only showing wireframe. So if I go to show in always, you'll see the lighting now. So quite a nice little tip that. So in wireframe, you'll only see it in rendered mode. But as soon as I'm just doing a couple of keyboard shortcuts here, guys, I do a lot of those. Command-Shift-G for rendering. Command-Shift-W for wireframe. These just basically instantly turn on your rendering on or off. So you can see the difference it makes just with that little bit of extra lighting added in. And I don't know whether you're aware of this, but in Vectorworks, there was a limit on shadows. Okay, that was being removed last year. And there was a limit on lighting, and that's been removed this year, or the other way around. Okay, so there used to be eight shadows and 8 lights. That was the maximum. So if you've ever looked at rendering in Vectorworks before and it didn't look as good as you wanted it to, that could have been the reason. But with no limit on shadows and lighting now, and things like these environmental reflections, I personally think the rendering for actual CAD software is absolutely brilliant. And people go on about SketchUp, but you can't do this in SketchUp. You can only do sketchy stuff in SketchUp. But I think I've proved that you can do that in Vectorworks as well as the realistic stuff as well. So the final thing then I just want to talk about is 2 extra settings or 3 extra settings. It's called depth of field. So with the depth of field turned on, you can see we've got this nice blurring out of the distance. And you'll find the depth of field settings in the shaded options. And what's really nice in the new interface is all gathered together here now. So we can go to the camera settings and I can just enable or disable my depth of field. And what's really cool is I can click a focal point, focus on that chair or table, and basically it sets the focal distance so that everything else gets a little bit blurred out for me. So pretty cool setting to have. And if I increase it, let me increase it a little bit more. Let's go to 3, let's go to 2 meters, 2M. Oh, you can definitely see there's some depth of field there, but it actually does work in real time. It's sort of, a little bit blurry and then it kind of clears out as you get further forward. So that's a really nice new impact. The depth of field gives you this distance and depth range. Very, very cool feature. Finally, we've now got bloom. Okay, so bloom is something that gives you a bit of a glowy effect, really. Okay, you can see I can enable bloom. And basically it means these light sort of bright surfaces just sort of give off almost a bit of light. Now, I've over-egged it to sort of clearly show you, but if you go a bit more subtle, it does actually enhance quite nicely the image. It just sort of lifts it in certain areas. So the bloom is really, really cool. We've also got a couple of other settings if you're a photographer in Vectorworks now called exposure settings. And this is basically where you can adjust the different exposure, film speeds as well, and even f-stops as well. So if you're one of those sort of people who love photography, this is a really nice aspect to control the brightness and the sort of different characteristics of your image. So guys, what do you think about the new rendering in the latest Vectorworks? Are you sort of pleasantly surprised? Yeah.
It's very
Great.
nice. It's very nice so that you can actually start to control where the focal point is and create that nice kind of blurred background that you get that concentrates on some of the foreground imagery like you'd get in natural photography.
Yeah, you can imagine an elevation with some trees behind the building, and you do a nice render and you blur out the trees adequately, so you get that nice blurry sort of backdrop. You know, obviously maybe not in a space like this working as well, but yeah, still very cool.
Do you find that people still need to use things like Photoshop on their images now?
I mean,
Like,
Photoshop, I don't hardly ever use it for anything to do with CAD now or InDesign. I do all my desktop publishing in Vectorworks, and I do most of my image making in Vectorworks now. Okay, the kind of thing that I would have done in Photoshop was add people, but I probably do most of that in Vectorworks or Twinmotion now.
right.
I always find the more you do in Photoshop, the more redundant it is when you have to change the image and redo all the work again. So I try and totally minimize the Photoshop stuff until the final tickle at the end. And I use those Photoshop images back in Vectorworks. I literally import the PSD file, and you'll notice that you can import image files, including PSD, and you can reference them. So that means if the Photoshop document changes, it just updates my Vectorworks drawing or sheet.
Oh, very tasty. Okay, so basically you can work off a whole load of reference files essentially. So you know everything just updates automatically from the CAD file.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really nice that you can update PDFs and images as well. That's a really cool feature. You just don't need InDesign or Photoshop hardly at all. So it's an expensive bit of software to maintain Photoshop. Sorry, Adobe, but you know. Right, the final thing is animation. You know, Vetwitz does have quite nice animation built in. So I've just activated a camera, and now I can click play, and basically I can just pre-record a little walkthrough animation. And this is something that you can just draw the path, or you can set up a bunch of save views. Again, it's not Twinmotion, it's not Enscape, but in terms of animated capability, it's nice to have, definitely. And if you kind of render these out at, say, 60 FPS, they can be pretty smooth, actually. They look pretty amazing. So that's the animation camera there as well. Okay, guys, good. Right, I'm going to close that file down, and I'm going to jump back into my presentation, if I may, and carry on with my talk. So that was 3D rendering in Vectorworks. Now, I just wanted, if you're interested, I don't have to do this, but if you are interested, I can spend a few minutes showing you some of the actual 3D modeling and do a little live demo. Would anyone like to see that?
Yeah, go for it.
Thumbs up. And we've got some tower buildings here. Here we go. So I'm going to hold down my command key and tell you what, let me just close this big file down for later. Command key, click on this one, and let's launch this one here. There we go. Right, cool. Okay, so I'm a bit of a fan of just playing with software. I love playing around with software in my free time, making videos, that sort of thing. And I quite like, you know, having the idea of being a skyscraper architect. It's very unlikely that I'll ever get commissioned to do a skyscraper, Rion, but I like the idea of having a go and seeing what I can come up with conceptually. So these are just a few sort of weird and wonderful kind of concepts that I've kind of had a little bit of a play with over my time. I can't quite remember how to model all of these, to be honest. So I'm just going to go and jump in and model something, but show you a couple of the processes that I would use. So let's just swing around a couple of views. You know, these are very, very quick to model, as I'm going to demo. I've also got one here that I was just messing around with the other day. Okay, and this is really cool in that this is using something called an auto hybrid. Okay, so what this does, the auto hybrid means that I can represent the object at a height at any level. So you notice I'm cutting through at 200 meters. So that's right above, so I'm cutting through right above. If I cut through at say 30 meters, it will basically give me a different floor plan. So now, you know, now I'm cutting much more down at this sort of level. So the auto hybrid's really, really cool in that basically, let's do 100 meters. That's probably a bit too high. Let's do 50 meters. You can see it basically update its geometry depending on the height that you're actually telling it to slice through. The auto hybrid's a really useful thing in BIM because if there's something that you can't model with the BIM tools, you know, regular walls, windows and doors, you do this sort of freeform modeling type effect, and then you say, look, give me an auto hybrid of what this thing would look like above or below at 30 meters. So it means that you can kind of represent things two-dimensionally from very complex objects. It's a really, really important sort of tool in the armory of BIM. Let's go on to my live demo though and see how this works. So I'm going to turn my page boundary back on. I'm going to kind of start off with the regular polygon tool, hiding under my polygon tool. I've rearranged my workspace a bit, you can see. I'm just going to go for it. I'm really not quite sure what I'm going to model. Let's do 20 meters and let's change into 3D and let's just push and pull 100 meters. Okay, so I've got a little tower building here. Now you notice that when I'm changing view, at the moment Vetwitz is giving me a perspective view. One quite nice new preference that you can change is that you can get it to remember the render mode. Okay, so what this means is I can have separate render modes for primary views. So if I put it into front view, I don't really want that in perspective. Okay, I'd rather have that in orthogonal. Okay, so that's straight on. So what that means is now I've got plan. When I go to front view or right view or back view, I'm straight on. But now in any of the other views, by the way, sorry, I'm just clicking my numerical keypad here to access all these 3D views on the keyboard. So very easy to revolve around. But I really like that new feature of having primary views and secondary views in perspective. I think that's cool. Okay, so here we go. So a couple of tools that I just wanted to show you. You may have missed these. So I'm going to drag out this 3D palette. Now this first tool is called the Offset Edge tool. And there's a couple of modes on this tool. It's really powerful. You can basically select an edge, move that edge, and what it basically does, it splits the face so that you can now kind of split your face and just push and pull. Okay, so let's do that again. Let's just sort of push and pull, come in a bit there, and just raise this bit here. So you can see I've kind of sculpted that little building a little bit more in that sense. The second mode of this tool is that it takes what they call an edge loop. So this time it offsets the entire edge. Let's do 2 meters and let's just push that in. Let's go minus 2 meters in. Okay, so you can see that I'm able to kind of basically push these surfaces in or out, depending on what I'm looking to do. Basically, it takes the entire edge. Let's bring it down again. Let's do 2 meters again. This time I'll come out the other way. Let's go 2 meters outwards. So you can see I can push in or pull out, very easy, what I call solid modeling. That's pretty cool. So definitely crack on and have a go with this edge offset edge tool. I keep calling it edge offset, a great little tool. Okay, the next one, which you may not have tried, is quite a fun one, is, let me just put it into isometric view for this one. Always looks weird after perspective, is the deform tool. And it's pretty powerful, this tool. So this means that you can basically select an object, select a center point, and basically click, and basically you'll see that I can now twist my object as much as I want. Let's just do a 90-degree twist, just to create a bit of interest in this weird and wonderful tower building. I'm not sure what I'm creating, but it's fun to do. As well as that, the deform tool has a very nice taper mode. Okay, so let me just do something with the push-pull tool. Okay, so what I'm going to do is actually just push and pull another edge here and just ungroup that one so this one is separate. Okay, that means that I can use the deform mode to basically see if I can kind of taper it in a little bit there, just on the top there. Can you see? So very easy to taper. And then when I'm ready, if I want to, I can select both of those and just add them back as a solid again. So that's pretty cool. So that's the second tool that I would say is one of these unknown tools that you may not know about. Now, the third tool is basically a new feature called the 3D dragger. Just wanted to demonstrate this. Where's a good spot to demonstrate this? So what I'm going to do is use the extracting tool, and I'm going to extract a surface. So this allows me to extract any surface from my model. Let's click on this one and just click extract. Now, if the object is flat, which this one is, it's a planar object, you can see. So this is just a polygon. Okay, if I take something a bit more complicated, such as a surface here, this will be a NURBS surface. So when I click extract on that one, you can see that I've actually, give it a slightly different color, a NURBS surface here. And what you're seeing here is a phenomenon called Z-fighting, where the two surfaces inhabit the same thickness, if you like, infinitely thin. So sometimes you need to do something called shelling. And the shell tool is pretty amazing. It basically gives something a thickness. You can see I've shelled it by 150 mil thickness there. So basically that's a separate object, like a piece of cladding now. Okay, so really two modes there. The extracting tool, really, really great for just extracting a surface, explore, and then if you do want to give it a thickness, you click and then shell it as well. That means then it's a separate object that you could color up. Let's go to Benjamin Moore Designer Colors, and let's go for a nice Spanish red, just for the sake of what we're doing. Okay, now the final thing I want to show you is really quite powerful. So if I take this surface here, I can go to my 3D Power Pack. This is something that people don't know about much. And I can basically turn this 2D object into a surface with curves. So essentially this is a NURB surface. Now, this means that I can use something called the degree weighting to give it more vertices. And if I now click the reshape tool, you can now see these vertices forming here. Now, what's really cool about these is I can now just push and pull these in any direction using this new thing called the 3D dragger. Okay, so this is absolutely fantastic for what I call organic sort of form modeling. You can basically select one or more vertex and basically just start pulling the cage, if you like, that basically controls those vertices. And this is something that you couldn't really do in Vectorworks before, you know, just dynamically model this sort of subdivision NURBY stuff. I think that's pretty cool. Very easy to interact with by selecting, and then you've got this nice, very clear 3D dragger, don't you think? You can also kind of rotate it to a different angle. So, you know, definitely take a bit of skill to master, but I think that this means you can model some incredibly organic forms. And as I say, with things like the shelling command, you can just sort of immediately, let's shell it to, let's make it a bit thicker, let's make it 500 mil so you can kind of see it. You know, you can kind of shell that organic form up there, whatever that might be. Pretty cool. Final thing I want to show you is the texture tool, which is a really nice newish addition. And basically this allows me to select various textures from my resource manager, which is a wonderful element of Vectorworks, and basically just apply them, not to the whole object necessarily. Let's do it to the whole object. Okay, but you'll see that I can actually apply them to different surfaces. So basically I can just apply to individual surfaces with this mode. So let's go to another material here. On this mode here, look, you can see it's pretty easy for me to, let's use something a bit clearer. Can you see how I can just sort of paint these surfaces using texturing? Very, very cool. So, you know, this sort of thing was quite difficult before. You couldn't really kind of just do that if the object was one solid thing. But now you can apply what they call surface overrides to all of these textures, these surfaces. And this is a very neat feature that not all software has. And you can kind of scale all of that up and, you know, rotate it around as well. There we go, guys. And with the clip cube, I can also do the same thing in that I can kind of cut through at various heights if I want to as well. Good. Any questions on that, guys? What do you think about some of those weird and wonderful 3D modeling capabilities? They're quite fun. I mean, you know, I know I've just modeled something crazy weird, but, you know, this is where your imagination takes you when you're trying to present. And I would recommend giving it a go because you can actually come up with some of these amazing conceptual ideas that you see in DZine and all the magazines all the time. And I'm always thinking, oh, how could I model that in Vectorworks? You know, it's a good way to go. It's definitely fun. Okay, brilliant. So I'm going to go back to my presentation. How are we doing, Ryan? We're okay so far?
Yeah, we're great. We're doing well.
Good, good. I may have to skip out a couple of things. I'll ask you if you want to have a look at wall closure styles. You may not want to. Let me show you very briefly what this one was about. It was something that Vetwitz introduced fairly recently, where you can have different closure on your walls. So you can have things like splayed reveals, angled reveals. You can see here I've got some radius reveals as well. And what's nice about that is not only does it work really well in plan, and give you a nice level of detailing where I'm returning my plasterboard and returning my external cladding. That wasn't easy to do before, but it is quite straightforward now. What's quite nice is, as well, you can right click and basically, if you just don't want the wall closure to apply, you can just turn it off. Okay, so that one just won't have the wall closure. So you've got real flexibility. It used to be all or nothing, it isn't. And now, within a wall, when you do the wall closure, you actually have numerous styles. I've only got the one set up. What it means is you can have multiple styles set up per wall. So imagine one with a splayed reveal, one with a rounded corner, and one with no kind of, just maybe a single-sided splayed reveal. So you've got complete flexibility over your reveals and what you do both in plan and 3D. And what's nice is you'll notice that it actually kind of works nicely on the inside as well. See how the plasterboard returns on the inside? So you don't get any of that sort of seeing the construction inside anymore.
And it's easy for you to just export these into other projects and just build up a kind of standardized CAD library. I know, in fact, actually, you have a lot of kind of already standardized CAD libraries. Do they come with Vectorworks, or are they things that you need to purchase separately, or?
Yeah, so thank you, Ryan. That's a very good leading question. I appreciate it. So if I pop up my wonderful resource manager, you'll notice I'm a big fan of favorites. And I've developed lots of libraries. I think I've got about 50 now. I think I sell at least 25 of these on the website, so check them out. So I've got kind of libraries of things like details, construction details, but the main stuff is like people packs, vehicles, trees. It's kind of everything any architect needs to do the job on a daily basis. You always need hatches, construction hatches, and walls. So if I go into walls, I can right click and open my file. And this for me is, this is how I do my walls. I like to have visual libraries where I can go and select the wall type, copy them, and bring them into the file. And what I encourage practices to do is set up their own wall types per project, and you can then reference those into multiple projects. So if the wall type changes, it can update potentially, 10 different documents very easily by having a centralized project library. But what's really cool about these walls is, there's sort of the simple level of detail, the detail level of detail. They come with a few materials, but all of this can be swapped out. And then at the end of the day, if you want to, all of these styles can just be edited quite flexibly, just adding more components and adjusting things like the thicknesses as well. You can actually build in more than that. You can even build in things like materials and things like U values and other quantities as well. This is something that I train people how to do if required. But yeah, if you want to do the wall closure, you go to this little wall closure inserts here. Can you see? And this is how you can start to do things like the splays. So you can basically just do, let's say 200 mil. You can see it starts to splay. This is just a preview rather than a sort of accurate representation. And as I say, I can now create a new wall closure set if I want to. So this is very powerful. It means that you can be really flexible with the way that windows and doors sit in walls. And I've not seen other software do this as elegantly as Vetwitz does. And I'm just amazed that not everybody knows, or uses this feature. So it's pretty cool.
That's been something that's interested me before when I've spoken to people who have been using Vectorworks for a long period of time. They've been using it solely for two-dimensional drawings, and then they're still drafting out details like this rather than having them kind of automated inside of a workflow CAD library, which is just massively inefficient. And the fact now that you can do it and it's all 3D as well, and that you can build these libraries out yourself, it's just enormous time saving.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, so I kind of make libraries of lots of things, Ryan. I'm a big fan of this, and then I can just reuse them. So look, this is so cool in Vetwitz. Now, in Vetwitz, you can basically just dynamically resize your openings in 3D, you know, or in front view, or whatever you want to do. Okay, so it's really easy to do. You can then go down to your object info and say, look, I'll make that 5 panels or 6 panels, or just adjust. So all of it's very interactive, and there's a lot more sort of what I call dynamic control than there used to be. So this makes life much easier for things like doors and windows. You know, got a window here, I can just dynamically squish it in. Previously with Vectorworks, you used to have to go into dialogues and do a lot of numbers here and there and everywhere. But now I think a lot of it is upfront, sort of more straightforward. Oh, my dialogue's right over there, look. So, you know, previously I would have had to go in and sort of put the width in here, 4 meters, and then it will respond. Now I can just drag it and it resizes. Pretty cool, eh, guys? Don't you think? I think it's you can't deny that's user-friendly. It just is. I mean, it's just as simple as it can be. Mm-hmm. So this is one thing that I do find with Vectorworks. People coming from other software, I won't name names, but you know, the other 2 BIM softwares that we've talked about often say that it's easier. And I mean, personally, I agree, definitely, for sure. Yeah, so very important to build up a good library of walls, windows and doors, all those basics, of course, people, trees, cars and hatches, but all the BIM stuff, that's really important. And then you can basically just copy and paste it into your next design file and you're away. So that's very cool. So I'm a big fan of libraries. Good. Let's shut that one down as well. Okay.
I guess there's a wider conversation here about how offices develop their own CAD libraries and standards and how they should kind of curate those.
Yes, indeed. I spend a lot of time when I'm teaching and training. I'm very generous with sharing my libraries, but the most important thing is I share them and explain to people how they then develop them and expand upon them and make them tailored towards, you know, North America or Canada or Vancouver. Obviously, English wall types will be different, but the concept and principles will be the same. So you just need to kind of build those up in a centralized library. You can then take them from the centralized library to a project-specific library, and that means that you then have the benefit of referencing resources into multiple design files. So if the wall type changes, you change it in the master file, and then it'll change in 20 different files as you open it without doing anything. You know, as opposed to going through 20 files and changing the wall type 20 times. So really important to be efficient. Good. Any questions? Shall I carry on?
I kind of had a question about the referencing of the wall. Like, do you actually do it? How do you reference your wall? So like, because we have kind of a same thing going on, like creating a library, but I haven't heard about referencing a wall and having it updated.
Let me show you. So here I am in another project I was going to show you. Basically all I do, I go into my libraries, I select my wall, I use my filter and go down to wall styles, select the wall I need, and rather than dragging and dropping or right click and importing, I click reference.
Okay. And
then when I reference, it basically brings it in as a reference file, but it only brings that resource in. Okay, it's already in there, so I won't reference that particular one. Let's see if I can choose something that isn't in there. Let's choose one that definitely isn't in there. But what will happen is it will then appear in italics. So the only difference is you'd see the text in italics, and when you hover over it, it will say referenced resource. Okay. So then if the centralized wall type updates, it will update this file and any other files required. Okay. So it's pretty cool. It's a good little workflow, definitely.
Yeah, thanks. I wasn't aware of this one. Thanks.
No worries. Good. I just want to show you this little project briefly. It's another little project. I'm quite pleased with this little project. It was a little house for an elderly client who wanted to sort of downsize and retire. Essentially a bungalow, single-story building in the UK, we call that. But I was quite pleased with, you know, contemporary design and sort of relatively interesting sort of use of materials. And using my save views, you can see that it's quite easy for me to kind of navigate around and get lots of different views, including, you know, inside. And sort of, you know, I think this sort of gives the client quite a nice experience and confidence when they're sort of especially older clients who just didn't understand 2D drawings. I'm not being funny, but they just didn't get the drawings. You know, they were in their 80s. So they were really impressed by having a walk around in 3D. So what I really want to show you was, as well as that, I've got all of my sheets in the one file. So Vetwitz is extremely efficient at this. All the traditional drawings, as well as, you know, some really nice rendered site sections. So that's one thing I think is really important, is Vetwitz is brilliant not just for the architecture, because there's Vetwitz Landmark, you know, we have all the site capabilities for site modeling and really nice landscape and planting. You know, personally, I use the design suite, which features Architect, Landmark and Spotlight as well. So that's really cool. But yeah, even without Landmark, you can do some really nice sort of contextual site stuff as well. Okay, the real reason I wanted to show this file though is something a little bit more technical on the BIM side, was something called graphic legends. Now I think this is a bit of a killer feature for 3D workflow. If you're not convinced already by the flashy sort of graphics and the renderings, let me show you this. Right, so here is a graphic legend of my window schedule. Let me just show you how I create that from scratch. So I'm going to delete it. So all I would do is go into my DIMS and notes, select the graphic legend tool here, go up to the top, choose from a library of graphic legends that Vectorworks give you, but also I've tweaked and modified and, you know, made my own. I've got a library of these. So you can see some of the sort of standard ones here. I think it was, which one was it? It was that one. So I just double click to activate that one. And all I do is basically draw across my sheet. And you'll notice down here, Vetwitz is doing some operations and it's generating a graphic legend of all the windows in this file. Now, how much time have you ever spent doing manual 2D drafting of doors and window schedules? You know, this is boring days of boring work, isn't it? And if something changes, you've got to redo it all. I mean, I personally hate the boring stuff in architecture. I think there's plenty of that. You know, I don't know who says they love it, but we all do it. I mean, we've all done it. But for me, this kind of killer feature of having a window schedule is particularly nice. And you'll notice that it's got all the dimensions, and obviously if I update this on the drawing, these will just immediately update dynamically as well, and they're very, very cool features. So I would definitely encourage you, if you're not working in 3D, to be working in 3D. Even if you don't like all the flashy Twinmotion and the rendering stuff, you probably want to do it just for the documentation benefits of saving time and being fully coordinated and not making errors. You know, so yeah, pretty cool. It's a pretty sophisticated tool. I'm not going to really go into how it works, but basically you can kind of, you know, set this up, really kind of define what it is you want to search in your document. You can pretty much schedule anything. So anything that you've used in Vectorworks, even things like furniture schedules, pretty cool. What do you think, guys? I think that's a really neat feature of why you should work in 3D alone, even if you don't, you know, go for the other stuff.
Yeah.
That schedule, is it every single instance, or you can redefine it so that types of windows are grouped? And
yes, you can do it by layer, by class. You can do it by style, by type. There's so many different factors, so you can filter out exactly what you want by using multiple options. You can actually filter it out by a viewport. If you really want to, you can create a viewport, turn on just certain things, and then filter via viewport, and then it'll only schedule what's in that viewport visible. So lots of flexibility. I was very impressed. This is like the second iteration of, these came in 2023. They've been improved quite a bit in terms of user friendliness in 2024. And yeah, I found them to be a real benefit for sure. So if you're not using them, get them on the list of something to use, I would say.
We've got a number of questions there from Rob.
Go for it. Hey, Rob.
All right, question one. What's the learning curve like? Because this is like super dense. It reminds me of looking at Revit interface. It's like,
Yeah, I think the learning curve for Vectorworks is good, actually. I think, look, all 3D and BIM software is complex these days. There's no getting over that. But I think it's and I know that a lot of clients have told me the same, it's the easiest to learn in terms of the approach of 2D to 3D and then BIM. Personally, I agree with that. You know, other people might disagree, but I've heard of people going on, you know, 5 days of intensive Revit training, blowing their brains out. It's quite hard work. So I'm not putting any other software down, but I think with Vetwitz, you can kind of move along gently from 2D to 3D to BIM workflow. So I think yes, everything has a steep learning curve to get to the ultimate. There's so much stuff to learn, but I think it's achievable. Definitely, Rob.
Okay. And 2, how does it compare price-wise to the other BIM software?
Well, I won't talk about that. All I'll say is I know Vectorworks is the most cost-effective compared to ArchiCAD and Revit. I won't go into specific prices. Anyone in the UK, come and talk to me, of course. I'm a reseller. And, you know, but the good thing with Vectorworks is you now have a subscription model, which is fairly low entry cost, I'd say. So you can try it for a few months, and if you didn't get on with it, you could move away. But, you know, you can get a yearly subscription as well. But yeah, it's definitely the lowest cost compared to ArchiCAD and Revit by a long way. Hardware requirements. You can have it running on not a very powerful Mac if you don't need, you know, you can run it on Mac or Windows, which is really nice, cross-platform.
Yeah.
Revit, you need a bit of a supercomputer, I'd probably say.
Right. And lastly, how does it handle IFC format?
Good, yeah, it's really good Vetwitz IFC. Basically, they've probably pioneered it more so than Autodesk, in my view, because Autodesk quite like the idea of a fairly closed system of everyone using Autodesk and Revit, but Vetwitz have had to be very open and really push the IFC. All of it is really kind of built in, import IFC. Look, you've got a really wide range of import file formats in Vectorworks, all the DWGs, IFC, Revit file, even import native Revit these days, all the image file formats, and then loads of 3D file formats, including SketchUp, come in really well. You know, going the other way, there's even more file formats that you can export as well. So I've never found that I was stuck not being able to get something in or out of Vectorworks in some way or another. It's pretty good for that. And we're almost on to the final sort of few projects I wanted to talk about. Okay, so look, this is another nice little project I was privileged to work on for an eco home, and it was a decent sized sort of single family residence, actually a pretty big house it ended up in the end. Okay, and you'll see why I'm showing you this, because in Vectorworks I've got some really nice renderings, and I've got some nice what I call save views, and I can kind of jump around, tell the story to the client of what their building is like, and that really helped sell it to the client as well as to the planners. And if I go onto my sheets, just let that animate, I've also got these, really nice sort of different types of drawings. I've got this sort of rendered floor plan, which I think is quite sort of conceptual, and a rendered plan here. There is a nice little sketch filter that you can turn on if you want to. It's not quite the same as SketchUp in that sense, but if you go to foreground rendering, hidden line, you can also introduce a whole bunch of sort of sketch renderings in here. So yeah, it does have this sort of wiggly wobbliness that you can create, Chris. And that's something that I'm quite keen myself to do at the early stages of designing. I don't like to show final renders until I'm ready for them. And I'll often show quite sort of, sketchy stuff as well. Now I won't do it right now because it'd take a few minutes to render. I don't want to have to wait for that. But basically, yes, I think you can create a wide range of different styles using the Vetwitz rendering. We've also got, things like site sections, which are quite nice as well. And now with that new depth of field, which I haven't yet tried on these, that could really help, Ryan, in terms of fading out those trees in the background. I really like drawings like this, kind of exploded, sort of isometric sort of graphics. These are cool, these are easy to achieve just using viewports, basically splitting the model apart in its natural way you've built it in different layers and just representing those. Also, love this tool here. This is a notes tool, and the way this works is basically you go onto the callout, kind of drag off a note, tap into a database potentially. So I've got like a database of notes here, That isn't actually my database, but it doesn't matter. And, I add a note onto the drawing. And then basically, if I do want to, I can do place as keynote. So it actually adds the note to my keynotes as opposed to on the drawing itself. It's a great little tool, the keynote tool. But I think, depending on what you want to achieve, let's open this file. Something called viewport styles, which is a brand new feature that Vetwitz introduced. Okay, so here we are in the building model. The previous file was the site file where I'd referenced the model in, the building model in. So I quite like keeping my building model and my site separate so that then I can, just kind of represent plans in a different way. You can see also one really nice aspect is this level of detail. So here I've just got this sort of, blacked out poche type effect. Here I've got the detail, and here I've got the rendered floor plan again. So I've got these rendered elevations. Now what you can do, if you like the look of this style as an office, I'm not saying you do, but if you do, you can create something called a new viewport style. So when I create a new viewport style, basically I can call this elevation. Basically what this means is I can set up all the aspects of the viewport in terms of the visibilities of layers and classes, maybe scale, as well as the rendering style. The only thing that I might want to change though, of course, is the actual view itself. All right, so I'm going to turn off the view itself, but everything else I'll keep the same. I might want to change the class visibilities as well, but that's okay. So basically what that means is I can use this viewport, if I drag it off and just change the view to a different view. Let me just go to a different view. That's the back view. You'll notice that I can essentially use the same rendering style, or I could click replace and replace it with a different viewport style. So Vectorworks actually do give you quite a few different viewport styles, but these are just examples of the kind of things that you can do. What it means is, what I'm trying to say is, if you can develop a style, in-house style that you like, then it's easy for everyone in the team to share that style because it's just a resource that you can drag and drop in to your document and apply to a viewport like a plan, a section, or an elevation. So this is a bit of a revolutionary new feature. And it means that you can basically save a lot of time. I don't know what these are going to look like, so I'm not going to risk it. But if I've created them, I will know what they look like and I'll be happy to use them. Does that make sense? So yeah. In Vetwitz, having different styles, Chris, could be the answer to that. You might not get 100% there. There might be one extra little tickle in Photoshop, but if you can get the 95% there, I think that's pretty damn good. So those are the kind of things that you would want to use the viewport styles for. You'd play around until you refined it and you cracked it to a point that you're happy, and then you've got it as an office resource that anybody can drag in. You don't need to know how to create the resource or the style of rendering. You just get one of the office juniors to spend half an hour or a couple of hours refining it, and then you've got it. So yeah, viewport styles, really, really cool feature, definitely. Okay, let me go back. So that was the viewport styles. All right, so now coming on to the final couple of things, because I know we're going to run short of time. I just wanted to show you two things. In fact, I might save this one right to the end. This was done with BBA Architects. Do you remember?
Oh, right. Yes.
Really nice firm in Chicago. That was a project working with them. Ed at BBA, who's not here today, but hi Ed, if you're watching sometime. And he doesn't mind. He said I could check this project before. So if I click onto this, so here's the eco home here. Basically, I just want to click onto this. And I just wanted to talk about where Twinmotion comes in for a minute. Okay, so you've seen the kind of rendering that I'm getting out of Vectorworks all day long. Really quite good in my view for design and BIM software. But Twinmotion just takes it to another level. The rendering is better. You've got animated birds and trees moving in the wind. You could see if you're a bit closer. Really nice lighting. And just this ability to have unbelievable amounts of landscape and trees and hedges and things that you couldn't dream of in your CAD software. Okay, so, you know, the amounts of blades of grass, Vetwitz, just no CAD software could handle that. So this is where real-time software comes in. You know, you take the model that you've made as a BIM model for your planning and design and documentation, take it into Twinmotion or Enscape, and then add the icing on the cake. You know, the cat to personalize it, the movement of the lighting and the shadows during the day. I really love doing this. It's the fun bit. It's really fun. But, you know, I really kind of think this encapsulates the ability to step up to another level of rendering, don't you think? So, you know, to take that sort of design and within a real-time rendering software, these don't take long to create. That's what I'm saying. They used to. That 72 hours for that one image, Ryan. Now I can do this in minutes
Wow.
using my Mac or Windows system. So it's pretty cool.
Can you navigate in real time? So like just
Yes.
have the model at this level of graphics and just kind of
Yeah,
move around it.
you pretty much can actually. I would say these are 4K. You can pretty much get about 90% to this level of quality in real time. You've got to have a good machine, okay? It's no good having an old machine. It's got to be a really good Apple Silicon or Windows machine. Windows does have a bit of an advantage in that it has path tracing, but even on the Mac now, we've got Lumen, which is a real-time ray tracing solution, which is pretty cool. So yeah, they're definitely fun to do. I'm not going to render out a Twinmotion live in front of you. In fact, I normally use my Windows PC because my Mac laptop, you can imagine, is not as powerful as the Windows PC with a big graphics card. Right. So, you know, I really enjoy cross-platform workflow. But let me come on to my final thing then, which is my Enscape demo, and I will attempt to show you how this works by opening up this wonderful BBA project from Ed. So let's click on this kitchen. All right, so to begin with, this is a bit of a different flavor really. It's just showing you a little isolated model of a really kind of beautifully designed space, I think. And the way this was designed was basically with lots of cabinetry and, you know, really kind of ornate sort of refinements here. You can see I've got these nice views, and I think, again, you know, the lighting looks kind of nice just from Vectorworks. All right, but what I'm going to attempt to do is show you how we can take it to the next level with Enscape. So anyone ready for this? We'll go to Enscape, and with Enscape, it now sits on the Mac as well as Windows, which is awesome. You can plug it into your workspace simply by going up to third party and adding it to your workspace. Once you've downloaded the installer, you can get a trial for this. And basically, look, watch this. Here we go. I'm going to click Enscape and click a single button and launch. Right, over here on my other screen, Enscape is now loading in. Give it a second to load the model. Who's used Enscape before out of the group? Anybody? Yeah, it's cool.
Todd.
Cool. Todd, what do you think, Todd? You like it? I think that's a nod. So
yeah, I love it. It's amazing.
You know, here I am already in Enscape. Now, again, I'm on my Mac, I'm zooming, you know, lots of data flying around. So this isn't the best it can be. I can turn up the notch again to a high level quality, but I think you'll see that it's pretty good. I can navigate around in real time. I can spin the camera a little bit. I can use my U key and I key to change that sun coming into the building. That looks pretty nice, doesn't it? What's really cool is I can slide that across. Tell you what, bear with me. I'm just going to slide Vectorworks across as well. If I do that, yeah, that could work. That will, whoops. Hopefully dock it halfway. There we go. So this is what I have to do when I'm doing my YouTube because I can only share one screen. Okay, so let me do that little trick where I hide those palettes just so we've got two full screens. Okay, now watch this. If I click synchronize, Vectorworks and Enscape are now synchronized in terms of the view. So what I can do is using my walk through tool in Vectorworks on the other screen, I can walk around in Enscape. Now, if I've got a better computer, it will look even better and a bit smoother. And, but I think that's still pretty good. And I can have that on my other big screen as I'm working. I think this is the benefit of Enscape, this real-time navigation. If I go to my different view, I can double click into Vectorworks on the view, and that will navigate across into Enscape. I really like that. I think that's a really cool feature. And then vice versa, let's pop this into full screen mode. If I want to pop out my view panel, if I was a new view that I wanted to create, let's say I just come across a bit here and look at that kind of breakfast bar. Yep, that's nice. I can click create view. And what this allows me to do is basically, as well as changing the lighting live, basically if I click create, that will go back to Vectorworks. So we've got this two-way dialogue between my CAD software and my rendering software, which is quite nice. So the final thing then is let's do a render, and this is going to push it. So I'm going to go out to my settings, and as well as I like the white card renders. Sometimes these are quite nice, where you just sort of do that conceptual, crisp, sort of white cardy type render. And again, you've got the option to maybe have some sort of outliney stuff. So that's quite conceptual, isn't it? That's not quite the same as you showed me, but similar. Let's go back to fully rendered without outlines. And one thing I really like with Enscape that you can't do with Twinmotion, so there are differences. I like both. I really like both. And people always ask me which is better. And one is better for some things and the other is better for another. In a way, you need both tools in the armory. But basically, if I change that to a PNG, you'll notice that I can apply alpha channels, and I can also export all these different depth channels and things as well. So while we're doing some questions, I thought it'd be kind of fun to render that image out and let it go. So that's the video. Oh, it has a video editor now, which it didn't used to before. Let's get rid of that. Let's just render it. Here we go. Enscape kitchen renderings, that'll do. Okay, so that's it. It's going to render out in the background. It's a 4K image, and we're doing not just the rendering of the image itself, but all the depth channels. So I can then take it into Photoshop and using the things like the ID of the material, just do all this final sort of CGI tweaking. In a bigger office, your rendering experts will know what we're talking about here. So it makes it much easier to do post adjustment. So fire away with some questions. It's nearly done. It's on 56%.
Mahmood.
For Enscape, once you transfer it over, do you have to edit the materials, or like the materials from Vectorworks carry pretty well?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I quite like taking the materials as far as I can in Vectorworks, which is a reasonably decent way, because I quite like applying them in Vetwitz and seeing them in my preview of Vetwitz, but you're never going to get all the bump and the refinement and sort of diffusion, all the refining characteristics of high-end CGI in Vectorworks, okay? But what you can do is you can replace materials. You can also, so that's done now actually, you can also place objects as well. But basically, yes, you can add things like props, glasses of wine, wine bottles, and you can edit the materials as well, which is pretty cool. Okay.
So how would you suggest for businesses to be made, like what are the things they need to be doing if they're thinking about moving from 2D into, say, the 3D capabilities of Vectorworks? Because again, this is the thing that I see a lot with practices, whether they're using Vectorworks or they're using any other software, is that they're often just stuck in like the one capability that they know that piece of software to do.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about Vectorworks is that you can do an enormous amount of work and never have to leave Vectorworks. And we're talking about producing videos, films, short snippets, presentations, individual graphics. I mean, it's quite a, and BIM software, BIM capabilities as well. How would you suggest businesses to start kind of exploring the more capabilities of the software?
I would suggest, look, obviously your time is your time and people are very busy. So you've got to kind of invest that time wisely. Training is obviously designed to invest that time wisely and shortcut months and months of watching videos here, there and everywhere. Like I make a lot of videos. Yeah, please watch as many as you can. But you know, you'll get snippets from one or the other, but what you won't get from a 10-minute video is a workflow of here to here in 2 or 3 hours. You know, that's where the one-to-one bespoke training that I do really pays off, and everybody says everything that kind of makes sense. Do you see what I mean? I think honestly, teaching and training and investment in training is, in architectural practice, is, in my view, not that great. When I was an architect working for big firms, any training from anyone? No, never invested in me, nothing. I had to do it all myself, and time and weekends and evenings. I think things are better now, and people do invest in their staff, but you can't expect them to be twice as productive if you don't invest in them. It's like Tesla. He builds a new machine to make his Teslas and he's twice as productive, and he produces twice as many and makes twice as much profit. So yeah, I think it's about investment. And
it's interesting. When I was at RSHP, they were very heavy on the training for MicroStation at the time.
yeah,
And you'd have to do, every employee that started the company would have to do 3 months of training with the MicroStation team. And they had 2 MicroStation trainers who would come in, and they weren't there. They were both part-time, but you know, it was essentially they had one full-time MicroStation trainer.
yeah,
And
sure.
they would train on individual projects. They would train individual team members when they first came into the business to make sure that all standards were being done exactly the same.
Yeah,
And whilst it was annoying for the first few months, it
it's a
just
good
meant
investment.
that it was just I mean it was very, very slick and very, very efficient.
I think that sounds like a rarity to me.
It was.
Everybody knows how much training they've had in different firms as they work their way up to becoming partners, and I think we'll all have different experiences. But my experience was virtually nothing. I mean, you know, people just saying get on with it. So here's a computer, you know. So I had to be self-taught, and you know, I'm pretty good at self-teaching. That's what I like doing. But not everybody is, and other people really need mentoring and pushing along. So I think if you're doing 2D, there's a number of things you can do to dramatically improve your 2D workflow, referencing and resource management, libraries, project sharing, using walls, windows and doors, even if you're using 2D, much faster than drafting lines and shapes. But then once you start using walls, windows and doors and slabs, you're kind of 80% there for a 3D BIM model. So why not push that extra bit and start getting plans and elevations and sections from your model, which are all coordinated. And I don't think anybody would disagree that it makes sense. You know, they might disagree it's too hard, or they just can't do it, or the learning curve's too high. But ultimately, all the BIM software, Revit, ArchiCAD and Vetwitz can do this stuff. So your choice of tool is your choice of tool. But, you know, if you are using a tool, don't jump ship to another tool that's even harder to learn. Make the most of the one you have. Before you jump ship, you know, you'd have to have a good reason for not using Vectorworks BIM. If you haven't explored 3D and BIM in Vectorworks, then I would say that's the next natural step from drafting. Very enjoyable as well. It really is enjoyable. Here, by the way, is the rendering that we did in Enscape. So what do you think, guys? It looks cool. And
better than 72 hours.
Yeah, not bad. And you know, you've also got these other sort of channels like the ID and the material ID as well, which is cool because that means that you can then tweak the shadows, tweak the reflections, all that sort of stuff.
Beautiful, beautiful light.
Yes, very nice lighting. You know, look, people always ask me for a summary of what's better, Enscape or Twinmotion. I'm not going to go into that today, but I really like both, and you should definitely use both. They both have massive advantages for certain workflows. Maybe that's a whole nother webinar, Ryan. You know, real-time render. There's another new block, a kid on the block, D5 render, which is also pretty amazing. So there are, you know, a few choices now. There's 3, but only one on the Mac, Twinmotion. No, 2, Enscape. But Enscape isn't completely fully featured yet, like Twinmotion is, but it's coming. It's getting there. I think it will get there. So Yeah, it's good to see it opening up.
Brilliant.
I think
Brilliant.
Vectorworks are pushing the 3D rendering as well, but you know, it's just doesn't need to be real time, and you don't need people walking around in your Vectorworks model.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Very good. Any questions to wrap up? Mahmood.
I had a question regarding Revit collaboration with consultants. So it will happen that we will have to export our models and work with other consultants that use a different software. Do you have like experience with like other consultants, like their drawings? Do you have like was there any like issues with receiving Revit models and importing them and exporting IFC from Vectorworks?
Yes, there's a big topic there on its own, and the simple answer is there's always issues with exchanging between different softwares. It's getting better all the time, and it works pretty well at some levels, but it depends what level of expectation you have. You don't open a Revit model in Vectorworks and just start carrying on working with it like you did in Revit, moving doors and editing walls. It just doesn't work like that. The wall and the door will be there. Whether they'll be editable in the same way, they probably wouldn't be. But then again, you know, most workflows aren't like that. You know, if you're an architect using Vectorworks, working with a Revit-based engineer, you'll be importing some structure. Well, maybe you shouldn't be moving their columns and beams. Maybe they should be doing that and giving you back a Vectorworks model to it. You know, so you've got to kind of really streamline the collaborative workflow, particularly if you're working with other software. The interchangeability or interoperability, it's a long word to say, is much, much better than it was. In my view, never going to be perfect. So you've got to kind of leverage the opportunities or, you know, available to you. But there will be some things that work quite easily and other things that will cause headaches, I think is the short answer. There's things that you can do to improve it, put it that way. You can reference a Revit model, for example. So that means the model is held externally, it's brought into Vectorworks, you can see it, it's in position, but you just can't touch it or edit it because it's not your job. That's the engineer's job or the, you know, the drainage guy's job. So I think you've got to divide up the workflow.
That's interesting. I mean, that's even in a way kind of neater and safer.
It's safer, yeah.
Like it's their model. You're just designing your piece around.
Yeah, we've all got our liabilities. It's a complicated world, though. I think obviously some software companies would love you to just use one product for everything, and some contractors may try to push you down that route. What can I say? But it doesn't mean that it's the best software for conceptual design and early stage design and actually enjoyable designing within your business. You know, that might be the end goal of the contractor, but that doesn't always necessarily mean it's the most fun and best architectural software that you should use. So yeah, there's different pressures, isn't there, in commercial world than you will get in a smaller practice. I think the honest answer is you've just got to make the best of the software that you have available. You know, if you don't do that, then you don't know what you're missing. And if you have done it and the software still isn't capable of what you absolutely must have it do, then fine, you might need another bit of software in the office at some point, but not everybody might need it. You know, you wouldn't need 30 seats of something else, maybe just a few, and one or two experts who can operate it. So yeah, it's a long conversation, Mahmood.
No, thanks. Like that's the answer I was like kind of hoping for. Like I was just wanting.
Yeah, come across it all the time in the UK with bigger practices, particularly, you know, the commercial pressures of the Autodesk world I know are there. For anybody not using Autodesk, I get it. For ArchiCAD or Vetwitz users.
Well, that's it, isn't it? It's the kind of, there's a bit of a reaction of like Revit is so sort of dominant in the industry, and then everyone's suddenly, we've seen it so many times, practices have gone over into Revit and it's been a disaster.
I would agree with that.
It's just been a disaster.
Done it, thinking it was the way, but it wasn't the way. And actually, like, I'm not here to put other software down, but just master the software you have and enjoy your life using the software.
Can you elaborate why that was a disaster?
I mean, we'll have to go into each individual practices for why it hasn't worked as well as it was intended. There's often a very steep learning curve that happens, and it's often kind of too big of a project with too much of a change too quick.
Yeah.
As well. There's that happens, and it's just not the same drawing culture that they were used to, and the way that they're putting stuff together, and it's just.
In an ideal world, if you are using 2D, anybody listening, the migration from 2D to 3D modeling, like i.e. SketchUp replacement in Vector, is very easy, very, very easy, and a no-brainer, absolute no-brainer. The migration from 2D to BIM workflow, a little bit more sophisticated and a bit more to learn, but not crazy, and actually very enjoyable. But don't necessarily try and do it on the biggest project you've ever landed in the office as your first BIM project. Your reality is that will be tough. You've got to kind of work up, and if you find a nice little scale of project that you can practice BIM workflow on, leap at it. The simpler the better. Refine your skills and build them up over small projects, and then when you're ready for the big time, you'll be confident. But if you go in on huge projects without knowing what you're doing on any of the BIM softwares, probably end up in a lot of trouble. And it doesn't mean Revit or ArchiCAD or Vetwitz will be the solution, because you've got to get the skills there in the place and establish them and develop them before you tackle these big hardcore BIM projects. I think everybody who's done that will struggle. You've got to get and look, so if you're not doing BIM now, you might be in 3 years. Now's the time to start. Don't leave it too late. There's many advantages, and it's good fun. As I say, I just couldn't imagine going back to drawing a plan, having to copy a plan in and drop some lines down to draw some elevations and draw some sections and do some details, and then coordinate it all and do some scheduling manually on Excel, and then change everything again 20 times.
Actually, I just said something about details. Like, do you do details BIM as well? Like, so far, what I've been looking at was...
That's another talk, Mahmood.
Okay, so...
That'll be the next one. How to move from concept and design to more detailing and documentation.
Okay.
Whole nother talk, but yes, it can be done.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot, Jonathan. If we wanted to arrange like training or maybe talks offline, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, sure. Just reach out to me via my website, which I think Rion will happily give you.
Or we can just put your email address in the chat box.
Yeah, pop it in, info@jonathanreeves-cad.co.uk. Just reach out to me. I do global Zoom training all over the world these days. I really like that, actually. It's good fun. I don't get to travel as much as I used to, but I kind of feel like I've been to New York and Vancouver, but yeah, just Google me, Jonathan Reeves, or go to my YouTube site and link from there if you like. It'll be a pleasure to talk to you again in a bit more detail offline.
Yeah, Mahmoud's leading the charge over here, so he's going to be the first person in our office to know what we need. But that would be really great.
Yeah, fantastic. I say I've worked with a few clients recently in Vancouver, so it'd be a pleasure.
Superb as always, Jonathan. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rion. Always a real pleasure.
No, I likewise. I'm a big fan of Vectorworks, and I think it's for mid to small size practices. I think it's just the best bit of software people can be using, just because of its versatility and what it can do, and now its BIM capabilities. Yeah, it's fantastic. Brilliant.
Agree. Excellent. All right, wonderful. Nice, very nice to meet everybody. Thanks, Rion.
Bye bye.